Hello and welcome to Tonalist Painting with M. Francis McCarthy. This is your painter in residence, M. Francis McCarthy. And today you're going to be working on day 3 of 25 days of tonalism. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be putting this up. It's Wednesday here in New Zealand. Normally I'm doing this on a Saturday, but I had a little extra time today and I thought I'd maybe get a jump on it. So we'll see what happens. The name of this study is, this is my study after a painting by Francis Murphy, also known as John Francis Murphy, and I'm unfortunately don't know the title of his painting, so I'm just referring to it as landscape. John Francis Murphy was a pretty prolific guy, not as well known as, say, a George Ernest or Charles Warren Eaton, but he is known about, and frankly, it'd be great if he was rediscovered in a big way, and tonalism was too, and we could all just have one great big tonalist party together. John Francis Murphy, he worked, actually he was first generation tonalist, but he was quite young when he got into it, and I'd say he was actively working from 1870 to well into the 19th century. I'm believing 1910, 1915. Don't quote me. I'm doing this today by the seat of my pants. Now, we have covered John Francis Murphy extensively in the 100 Days of Tonalism that we did last year, so all you really need to do is if you go to my blog, you just type in a search term of John Francis Murphy and you'll get a ton of stuff on old John. I will endeavor to pick up some links, and one of the things that I did last year was I read quite a bit out of a history of American tonalism, 1880 to 1920, which is a book by a guy named David A. Cleveland, and an awesome book. If you can afford it, I highly recommend it. It's out of print, but awesome book. And so I probably read most of his chapter on John Francis Murphy back then. I'm not sure if I'll be getting into that again with the 25 days, but I will provide some links in my blog to some John Francis Murphy pages. And, as you know, and as I've discussed before, I'm not an art historian, I'm a painter, so I don't see it as my job to reinterpret and reiterate things that other people have written on the internet. You have Google and you have fingers, and I highly recommend using those if you want to find out more about this guy. I will say that he was considered to be the Corot of America, and the reason why he got this moniker is because he was really good at getting an atmospheric quality in his work, and he was also very, very strong on composition. And as radical as and as famous as George Ernest was for his composition, I think Murphy was the better composer of the two. Now, and of course, why go in there and compare any artist at all? It hardly makes any sense, but we do tend to do it, don't we? And because George Ernest's work was his best work, was so sublime and transcendent that he gets the edge as the greatest, probably, landscape painter of all time, definitely the greatest tonalist painter of all time. And that's saying a lot, since not everything that George Ernest did was what you would consider tonalism, whereas John Murphy was more solidly in that camp, and was pretty much the heart and soul of a tonalist, if you ask me. The guy that's even more of a tonalist would be, of course, Charles Warren Eaton, who, funny enough, late in his career abandoned tonalism and did some pretty garish paintings of the Italian landscape, which less said about the better. Anyway, this is not about Charles Warren Eaton today. It's about John Francis Murphy, and it's about me. It's about you. It's about tonalism. episodes about learning about tonalism, and one of my favorite ways to learn about tonalism is by making these little studies after these masters, and it gives me a lot of insight into just the way they would put things together. Although, I mean, I'm creating every painting the way that I paint and the way that I approach painting. I have no way of knowing if how they did their paintings, since they didn't have video back then. We just have to sort of guess, or we go by various notes and things. So, or maybe we're lucky enough they have left us a few unfinished paintings, and I don't know, for example, if John Francis Murphy worked on a red ground like I do. I don't know much about him. By the way, I apologize. I guess one of my neighbors is doing some weed eating, so you might hear a little bit of buzzing in the background, and just think of it as atmospheric noise. Hopefully, it's not going to be that dominant on the video here. So you're wondering, and he just stopped. That's so nice when they stop, isn't it? And this other knocking sound you hear will be the blind in my office here knocking against the windowsill as the breeze knocks it around, which is, not such a bad noise. It can get a little annoying maybe when you're trying to sleep at night. But so you're wondering, how's it going in the studio, Mike? How's it going, dude? I'm working on a pass of 5 paintings right now, and 3 of them I'm real happy with, and then 2 of them, they're okay. I worked on one of those 2 today, and I think I definitely pulled it further along than it was in the first pass. Did a lot of creative dry brushing with it, and I feel pretty good about where I've been going with the dry brushing these days. I've been knowing when to quit, and that's the important thing about dry brushing, because you can just dry brush your painting 2 bits and the whole thing just turns this big soft what have you. Also, this was a painting that I'd laid the paint on real heavy, and the neat thing about that is when you do the dry brushing, you can just kind of play up that texture and the strokes. And one of my favorite things to do is say maybe I've got an area of dark gray, and that's a cool, I can do a little dry brush over the top with a slightly lighter tone of a warm gray, so I'm getting to keep what I had before and accentuate it with a little bit more. Also, I like how this is a great technique for softening edges and things, and doing it in an organic way that takes advantage of the texture. I've noticed that, in fact, one of the things I noticed a long time ago, and maybe if you've worked with oil paint, it's very easy to sort of smear your colors together, and it's something I try to avoid. I try to paint my intermediate tones instead of smearing them together. Paintings that have all their colors smeared, blended together, they look very greasy to me, and it's unpleasant. So I'm always on the lookout for strategies for doing some blending and gradiating that aren't doing that, but are utilizing either immediate tones or, like I said, this dry brushing where I can just slightly brush over the top of what's below and sort of soften it and integrate it. And so one of the things that I tend to do if I'm really setting the painting up good for a good finish with the dry brush is I'll have more discrete patches of color, because I'll know that I can integrate them with the dry brush. And that was a painting I did today. It had a lot of chunks of gray that were quite discrete, and I was able to kind of get it blended together and looking nice. I'm pretty happy with it. And I guess one of the things I like about the painting I was doing is a scene of some California rolling hills, and it's based on a photo I took probably back in 2002 or something like that. And it was one of these photos that I'd originally attempted to do a digital landscape painting with back then, and it was fairly successful in that regard. However, if you look at my blog, you'll see I totally went off of the whole idea of trying to do paintings in a digital realm, people do it, and I think it's actually a great tool. Say if you're an illustrator, you're working for reproduction. However, if you're a fine artist and you're creating original works of art, there's a lot to be said for actually creating an original work of art as opposed to like a signed and numbered print or what have you. Anyway, we're getting close to the end here. This was John Francis Murphy, landscape we did today, day 3. Will it go up today on Wednesday? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It all depends. But it'll definitely be up no later than Saturday. So, anyway, thanks for joining me today for the 25 Days of Tonalism. And this has been your host and painter, M. Francis McCarthy. If you'd like to see more of my work, go to landscapepainter.co.nz and check it out. You can follow the blog through there. You can do a lot of cool things there. And we'll be seeing you next week. So meanwhile, take good care and stay out of trouble.